Welcome to Witham Sounding Board, a podcast sharing powerful business tips, insights, and trends for those seeking to become a rock star in their industry.
Hello and welcome back to Witham's CFO podcast series. I'm your host, Cuddy Thomas from Outsourced Accounting and Fractional CFO Line. If you'd like to know more about what we do and how we support our clients, please go to www.witham.com/oasis, and that's spelled OASYS. Joining me today is Liz Graham. Liz had an impressive career starting out as a corporate attorney to running multiple companies. She is the CEO at ADA IQ, a company that uses AI to enhance decision-making, radically reduce time to market, and disrupt all aspects of product development workflow. Our conversation today will touch on leadership transformation, data ecosystem insights, and the impact of AI on innovation. Please, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great, Cuddy. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm really excited to have this conversation today.
Very good. I am beyond excited. So take us back to the beginning. What led you to law?
You know, it's a great question. I actually thought if you'd asked me in, say, 10th grade, I would have told you I was going to become a doctor. Like, that was the path I was 100% on. And then as I was going through college, I realized I really love solving problems. And to me, the opportunity to move into law and be a professional problem solver and advisor was definitely the thing that drew me to the field. I guess I've historically been the person who tries to help mediate issues and find good outcomes. And so law seemed like the best place to do that professionally.
Very cool. And the ability to wanting to solve things and help people may have been one of the reasons why you decided to move from corporate law to the business world. Was there any other thing that?
Yeah. So at the heart of it, that's definitely the core reason. One of the things that I realized when I was at a law firm was I was missing the element of the job that dealt with the outcomes. So I'd be helping people put deals together or giving advice on how they could solve an issue, but I never got to be in the implementation part. So that prompted me to want to move in-house, which I did. And then what moved me out of being a company lawyer to working in operations was really customer frustration with the company. I'd go to public hearings and people would be raising issues about how, the company's business practices, billing or the products we were offering. And so I thought, hey, I can start to help solve some of these problems if I move out of law and over to operations. So that really was the catalyst to make the leap and become a business person. Although I will confess, I kept my New York bar good standing current up until this past year. So it took a long, long time for me to actually sort of retire from the practice of law.
Yeah, once a lawyer, always a lawyer. And so you were prepared. You had the background. Were there any surprises that you met along the line, and how did you deal with them as you get through to executive leadership?
I was surprised when I was looking to move out of practicing law at how many people really had a hard time seeing those skills as transferable to other areas of the business. And, people be like, well, you invested so much in that degree. Why would you want to do something else? I realized that I would never really be able to convince those people that there were other ways that the law degree would be applicable. But I was surprised for sure that there were people who really couldn't sort of see beyond the degree and what went into it. Things like problem solving we talked about, but negotiations, being able to just have the patience to read through corporate documents. All those things are very, very helpful in terms of just, my day-to-day and my career as as it's evolved through the years.
Yeah, it's impressive. Being a CEO, and I know you have to see a lot of even collaboration agreements, like the things that people have to read through that come by your desk. Do you find yourself looking at it from a corporate lawyer perspective or from a CEO perspective? Do you have that conflict of that guy? Should I be reading it from a CEO perspective or?
Yeah, it's a great question. Sometimes I do have to hold myself back from wanting to mark up the document like I'm another lawyer and I'm going to the legal team do their expert, because at this point, I haven't practiced actively in a long time, and stick more to the business side of things. But I do think it helps in terms of spotting things that might not be obviously problematic, but just having that instinct to say, like, that doesn't seem like a routine provision. Let me reach out to our lawyers and get their advice. So I'd say I'm like maybe a little more targeted in terms of how I use the legal team's time. But I know earlier in my career, I was much more involved in digging into the markups of the documents that I am now.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's talk about startup. How would you, specifically 8iIQ, how would you describe just the culture, the startup culture at 8iIQ?
So we are still a very early stage startup, and if I had to give you one phrase, it would be hands-on. This is this is an enterprise where we have a handful of team members who are working to build the company and build the product. So folks have to be able to flex across, different opportunities, bring their ideas to the table. And earlier this year, we set out our values for the company. And first and foremost, we want to solve for the customer. We are building a technology that helps, as you mentioned earlier, helps folks design and bring to market products that consumers will love. So we start with the customer at the center of what we do. And then certainly with AI, there is a lot of concern about trust in the technology, trust in the data set. So earned trust is another one of our values. And because we are working in an area that is design driven, we also have embraced creativity as one of our core values. And then the last one is empower and learn. One of the things that has been dear to my heart my whole career, and I think why I've transitioned in so many different ways in my career, is that I just love learning. And I think when you empower your team to follow their own curiosity and bring their ideas to the table, that helps generate a culture that people want to be a part of and feel like they have agency to do the things that maximize their contributions.
Yeah, that's good to know. And I think it goes the same for most startup. Like, people wear multiple hats, right? And what they can do is really limitless, right? Mm-hmm. But there's always challenges, right? So what are the challenges that you faced in scaling the business, and how do you overcome them?
So I would say, and I've been in later stage startups that had more of that hyper growth where you really needed to scale up very, very quickly. And probably the biggest challenge is not to break the business while you're scaling it, where, you have a lot of work that you just have to get done, but you got to figure out how to hit that inflection curve. One of the ways that I've tried to get ahead of that with my teams is to spend some time digging into at what point will the way we're working no longer work? Is that when we have double the amount of work that we have today, when we have 10x the amount of work that we have today? So when you have a sense of like, where are you going to hit that cliff? Then you can start to think about, well, is the fastest way to solve for that bringing in more people, just throw bodies at the problem? Or is it technology solution? Or is it a process change? Usually it's some combination of the three of those things. But sometimes I faced years where we weren't being able to add anybody else to the team. So then you have to roll up your sleeves and say, okay, we're gonna do twice as much work this year with the same amount of people. So everybody, where are the ways we can operate differently, knowing that there's a ceiling on what we're able to do in terms of adding people resources. And then for any team, you really have to understand what are the important metrics for the group, because if you're and sometimes, especially in a startup, that's really hard because you don't have a lot of history to build your performance off of. So sometimes it's just you take a stab and say, okay, I'm going to set my target here, or I'm going to start with this metric. And you could be all wrong, and very likely you might be wrong. So you say, we're going to test this out for a quarter or 2 quarters, and then we're going to reevaluate. Is this the right metric? Is this the right target? Is there something else that better characterizes what we should be holding this team accountable for, or showing our impact? So it's certainly in startup land, it's a bit more experimentation. And I know you work with a lot of CFOs, and I think that there's most likely more predictability in the types of metrics that those teams are working with. But when you are starting a new business or building something in a new field, you got to take some informed guesses, but don't have a lot of ego tied up in those guesses so that you can reset when you need to.
Yeah, and it's important to reset quick.
Absolutely.
Don't let your ego just keep getting you down in the wrong path, right? Obviously, AI is new, and so first, what are the attributes that sets Ada IQ apart? And then 2, what would be the advice that you would give to someone looking or finding or trying to join a startup?
What's particularly unique about Ada IQ is the AI models that we built that have a deep multimodal, so that means text and, in our case, designs, 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional renderings of products, so that we can very finely connect what customers are saying to very granular aspects of a product, and not only evaluate existing products, but also predict where new products and product concepts will resonate or not resonate with consumers. And where what we see in the marketplace right now is there are companies that are focused on the customer insight, some very well-known players like Qualtrics who are focused on that area. And then you've got generative design companies like Midjourney and design platforms like Adobe Illustrator. But there aren't companies that are sort of pulling this consumer insight thread the whole way through the way products are designed, developed, and brought to market. And that's where we see the technology that we've built as being particularly unique in the market. So we can equally help product teams with determining what are the key attributes that they should focus on in bringing products to market, but then we can also help buying teams or teams that are selling into retail to say, here's why our products are more deeply connected to where consumer tastes are going, or what you should understand about the portfolio of products that you're offering. And, you kind of think about it in the context of like the way Moneyball talked about the shift in baseball from being very subjective in how scouts were evaluating players to being much, much more data-driven. We're sort of like Moneyball for consumer products, where you can now take a lot of fragmented data, understand what's important to your consumer, and really stack products up against each other in an objective way. And then your second question around people thinking about joining startups, it's important to do your homework. A company at my stage is a very different proposition than a company that's gotten several rounds of funding and is profitable. So I think a couple of things that I think hold true for regardless of what stage that you're looking at is startups can be unpredictable. Part of what makes a startup unique is its ability to really pivot quickly, or find an opportunity in the market and go after it in a very targeted way. That's sometimes really hard to accomplish in a more established business where there are certain protocols or processes or annual budgeting cycles that you have to adhere to. So if you're someone who prefers to kind of know what the road in front of you looks like, you may want to think twice about startup land because it's definitely unpredictable. I think a lot of folks who are really inventive are drawn to startups because you don't necessarily have that road in front of you, and that can attract a lot of different talent. But one other thing is startups tend to move very fast, and it's hard to describe that to folks, sort of how it's different from some corporate environments. But that was something that I really noticed in moving from my corporate role at Comcast to joining HubSpot pre-IPO, was just the velocity at how fast the company was shipping new code and bringing new products to customers and then pulling things back if they weren't working. It was a completely different tempo than what I was used to in my corporate job.
Right. Interesting. So staying on the topic of AI and innovation, I'm sure you've seen multiple articles about, AI is coming to take your jobs. As long as jobs are going to be obsolete. Okay, what do we need to do? Talk to me about a responsible, ethical AI innovation, what it looks like. And how do you strike a balance between embracing cutting-edge technology and maintaining a human-centered leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, one of our core values is earning trust. And I think that that's so important because responsible and ethical AI to me is a technology that is transparent around the data that's being used to evaluate and create the output and the type of training that it's getting. I think I will hazard a guess, if you threw a prompt into ChatGPT and asked for a picture of what an AI startup founder looks like, it probably wouldn't look like maybe you or me, right? So these are important things for people to be critical consumers and ask the questions of the data that's being used, how it's being trained, and the teams that are developing it. I think it's really critical to have a broad range of players and data. And one of the things that we're doing with our output is, I call it showing your math, helping the teams that are using our product to understand how did we reach those conclusions that we are recommending. Because if it's just a black box, why would you trust it? So that's really important. And, it's so fascinating, the balance of technology and human-centered leadership. I'm actually doing a pitch in a couple weeks at the FEI conference in Boston, and the whole focus of the conference is really on that intersection of human creativity and technology. And as someone who's a very relationship-driven person, I like to focus on what are the things that are getting in the way of people doing their best work. That, to me, is where technology can be the most helpful. It's, from my standpoint, I want that human creativity. I want the empathy and understanding and foresight that people can bring to the businesses that they work in. And where I think AI and technology can help is to get rid of the things that are frustrating, repetitive, and augment what you're doing, give you insights. I've used AI to come up with the names of talks that I'm giving, hey, I'm giving a talk on this. Help me come up with a really good pithy title, because that's not, my expertise. But I think we're going to see a lot of exciting developments and some false starts, because that's what always happens when you're making these big technology shifts. And as long as we're critical consumers of the technology and use it to get better, then I think there's tremendous value in helping teams and people do amazing work and have very powerful tools to do it.
Yeah, and we've only at just the tip of the iceberg with AI. There's so much things that AI can do that we have not even utilizing yet. So we know what AI IQ does. Any future innovations or implementation do you like to share or just give us a tease about?
So many fascinating places that we can bring this product. One is looking at different industries. As I think I mentioned, we started in footwear, and that's been the focus for a lot of our initial customer journeys. But our technology can, I was talking with someone in the wine industry yesterday about how that industry is using consumer insights. And I was talking this morning with someone earlier who's very focused in the sustainability space and the potential for our product to help teams who are building products make more sustainable choices with the materials that they're using, and the process of manufacturing is also incredibly exciting to me. My last company was in the sustainability space, so I'd love to find a way to make this a powerful tool for helping reduce waste, ensure that products are more recyclable or more earth friendly, and do it in a way that still hits the cost and speed matrix that most companies are seeking. So I think our problem is going to be narrowing down what is the next thing that we want to develop. But I've been having a ton of interesting conversations on how we can broaden our offering.
Definitely exciting time at Data IQ, and for you, Lise. I want to thank you for coming on the podcast. It was just by far one of the best conversations I've had. We've talked on leadership transformation. I don't think we have enough time to talk about all the things that you've done, but hopefully we can do a recap. We do a repeat at some point. We've talked about startup ecosystem insight and the impact of AI innovation. Again, I'm your host, Cuddy. If you'd like to know more about what we do from Withum perspective, please go to www.withum.com/oasis. And that's OASYS. Please, thank you again.
Thank you, Cuddy. Really appreciate it. Great conversation.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you'll be first in line to hear what's coming next. Don't want to wait for our next episode? Check us out at withum.com. That's WITHUM.com.